I moved into the neighborhood that I live in at the age of 12. I'm 20 now. Ever since I moved in here, I was told of the woods and the strange things that went on in it. Sounds of drums, voices, screams, etc. Needless to say, the woods is creepy, so creepy that I refuse to go there at night. Let me explain. The woods consist of two sections, the front and the back. It's the back part that scares the bejesus out of me. In '98, a girl was killed in the front part of the woods, where she was raped and left for dead in the cold next to the old tractor. A tractor that had been rotting there for at least 30 years. Well, since the girl was killed, there have been some violent storms that have taken their toll on the trees surrounding the area of the death. My friend and I would go to the spot every now and again, until that night. I had a girlfriend at the time that lived on the road across the woods, so to get to her house, you could take the short way, which was through the woods, past the spot where the girl was killed. I'd walk my girl home, and I was returning through the woods, when I felt a sudden cold draft. Now mind you, this is the end of summer, so there was no logical explanation to see my breath during this time of year. I then turned to look over at the tractor, and I felt an overwhelming sense of depression and sorrow that made me feel sick to my stomach. I started to walk towards the tractor, and I could have sworn I heard the crying of a girl's voice say, "Run away." At this point, I started to pick my feet up and walk a little faster when I noticed a little girl standing from a distance behind the tractor. She didn't look to be more than 6 years old and looked about as solid and real as anybody I'd ever seen. I froze in sheer terror, knowing that there would be no way that a 6-year-old girl would wander off into the woods unsupervised and by herself, especially knowing the history of these woods. As I got closer to the girl, she ran further away and behind some trees, where she ultimately disappeared. It was not long after that I hightailed my butt back to the house as fast as I could. The next day I told my friend about what happened, so from then on, he walked with me each time I dropped my girlfriend off, hoping to hear or see something. It never happened to me again, but months later, I was talking to a friend who still hung out in the woods, and he told me he was sitting on one of the fallen trees, and he heard a girl crying. He said it startled him, so he went to go and leave. Just as he got up, he heard a louder voice say why. He said he felt depressed, and ran the rest of the way out of the woods. The woods has had a lot of strange things happen to it, like fires that start and go out by themselves, houses adjacent to the woods that had their backyards vandalized, and the sounds of someone knocking on the back doors. Interestingly enough, I found out that there was a forgotten cemetery somewhere back in the woods that had been neglected for years. I don't know what kind of paranormal energies take place in these woods, but I don't want to discover more of it. My parents still live in the same house I grew up in with my older sister. My experiences with ghosts began at about age 8. One night, I'd just gotten into bed and was waiting for my dad to come tuck me in. The lights were still on, and the whole family were upstairs. I wasn't alone or anything. I was wearing a nightgown. Suddenly, I felt 2 hands run quickly underneath my nightgown, up my legs, and over my body. I screamed bloody murder, and my parents came running in. I don't remember if they believed me, but I never slept in that room again. I traded rooms with my sister. Once she had begun sleeping in that room, she would tell us in the morning that someone would sit on the bed and say her name while they rubbed her head, but she never opened her eyes during these encounters. A few years later, I was getting my dad and I some ice cream in the kitchen. There was a new big bag of candy on the counter in front of me. Suddenly, it flew across the counter. I ran and told everyone. They believed me when they saw the candy on the other counter. Another time stayed homesick from school. I was lying in bed watching TV, and I kept hearing what sounded like marbles being dropped in the attic right above my bedroom. I was so scared, I called my mom, and she sent her friend over to stay with me. To this day, the TV in our kitchen turns on and off by itself. My aunt reported hearing music being played in her family room when everyone else was outside. Last weekend, my family gave me a bridal shower at my parents' house. When I got the pictures back, almost all of the pictures have orbs in them. I could not believe it. Whoever it is still there and still trying to be a part of us. It was my first time going to the Gettysburg War site. First, we visited their museum and looked at old clothing and war supplies. Then it was time for the tour of the battle site. It started off regularly, the guide showing us all the memorials and explaining this and that. Then it was time to get out of the car and look out over a field where a charge was made. It was a nice view stretching out before us, and behind us was a slope with a grove of trees to the right. While the guide talked, I noticed sounds of what seemed like a great number of people yelling and screaming down the slope, nearer in the grove of the trees. It was quiet at first, but it got louder, then quiet again. Even the tour guide stopped for a moment to question what those sounds were, and I even asked the guide if there was a reenactment going on down there. He just looked at me confused and said no. Perplexed, I asked if he had ever heard those sounds before while giving tours, and told us that this was the first time he had heard such distinct sounds that sounded like battle cries. There was even a moment where I was standing there, and I could have sworn I saw an extremely faded apparition run across the field for a second, then completely dissolve. Somehow I was the only one who saw this apparition. We then moved on, and as we walked back to the car, I asked my mom later about it. She thinks it was where the Confederate soldiers mustered up their courage by screaming war cries before they went to battle. I've been trying to find stories similar to mine ever since, but I've found none. My name is John, and I've been a Civil War reenactor for about 4 years now, attending living history events and reenactments throughout the mid-Atlantic states. I'd like to tell you about an experience that my reenacting group had at Antietam National Battlefield, Maryland. My company, Company G, 96 Pennsylvania Volunteers, annually has a living history event at this famed Civil War battlefield. It was here that in September of 1862, one day's casualties amounted to 23,000, more killed, wounded, or missing in one day than the casualties in America's previous wars combined. At one point during the battle, one American was injured with every second ticked by. I'd like to note that this was the ground upon which we were camping on. To continue my story, we traditionally take a walk into the battlefield to a small lane known as the Sunken Road. Here, Confederates hunkered down in a road that had been worn down by years of wagon travel, holding off wave after wave of heroic Union soldiers advancing upon them. Eventually, the Union forces swarmed over the Confederates' right flank and fired into the rebels from down the road, driving them off. This is where we annually took a midnight tour, hoping to catch a glimpse of energy left from 1862. Please note that even though the park closes around 10 p.m., the rangers often allow us reenactors to walk around. This is because if we found anyone defacing a monument or even shifting a pebble, that person will be praying for a ranger to come by and save him. So this night, about a dozen of us strolled down the sunken road and eventually came upon a monument located in about the center of the lane's length. We sat down along the banks of the road to relax and take in the atmosphere. About 20 minutes passed with silence and a few pictures taken here and there of us around the monument. Soon, 4 of us, myself included, chose to walk the remaining distance of the road to an observation tower, climb it, take a few snapshots, then head back. So we decided to walk down to the tower, ascend a few flights of stairs, and took a look around. Meanwhile, back at the monument, our captain decided that everyone had better get back to camp, so he sent 2 men to go retrieve us from the tower. No sooner had those 2 began to walk down the road, when the remaining few men heard shoes and heel plates, horseshoe-like plates we wear on our leather shoes, on the gravel and earth down the road. First 2 pair, then 4 pair, then 6, and so on. Equipment could be heard rustling around on the body: knapsacks, canteens, cartridge boxes. If anyone knows what it sounds like to have men marching on a dirty road with full gear on, it's us. The sounds continually crescendoed until one man sat up, looked down the road, and stirred the other men to listen. Just as they began to sit up and peer into the darkness down the road, the sounds faded away just as quickly as they came in. Another man jumped up, went down the road and looked over the fences and banks, only to find weeds and small shrubs. He figured that if this was some sort of ghost regiment, it may have followed those 2 men who had begun to walk down the road to the tower to fetch us. I also had another story I experienced firsthand during a sleepless night in an old gun mill. We also used to have an annual event at Jacobsburg State Park, Pennsylvania. On the land is the Henry Homestead, including a mansion and a house whose basement was the gun mill. The house now is a museum to the Henrys, and the mill below it is open to see the machinery and processes of old-time gun making. The history of the homestead dates back to the Flintlocks. Our event took place very near the homestead, and since it was going to be extremely chilly that night, the caretakers were kind enough to allow us to sleep in the house that night. Little did I know about the death that occurred in the house long ago. A young girl had contracted a contagious disease, one of those terrible, yet common diseases of the old days. She had died, and since it was thought that her illness could be contracted even though she was dead, the viewing of her body was not a traditional one. Her body was placed on a large windowsill inside the house, of a window outlet that protruded onto the front porch. This way, the viewers could stay out on the front porch and peer in through the windows to see her on the windowsill. Of course, nowadays, ghost stories fill the house, so now it was time to go to bed. You could say, more like hit the hardwood floor. Of course, the lucky guy I am, I got a spot directly to the large window and the windowsill. I laid there half the night, listening to each hour tick away on the clock in the next room. Eventually, I had enough, so I moved to a spot further away from the sill. I laid there for some time, and then heard something. The noise was coming from, it sounded like the downstairs. The best description I can give is that it sounded like an older lady mourning, or crying, possibly over the recent death of her daughter. It was not the house settling or creaking, as it continued for what seemed like years. Okay, well, maybe a few minutes. My house also creaks a lot, and it sounded like nothing I had ever heard before. Scared out of my wits, I frantically tapped on the leg of my first sergeant, laying just a few feet away from me. He awoke, and I told him to listen. He heard the sound too, but not even wanting to ponder over it, he nervously said, "Wonder what that was," and quickly laid back down. The sound soon died off, no pun intended. Sleep was pretty much out of the question now, so I laid there another hour or so, until I heard something else. This one is easy to describe. Imagine being outside, and 2 other people are far away from you having a conversation. You can make out murmurs, in tones and voice, but not individual words. Almost like being underwater, and someone is talking above surface. That's what I heard. Only it seemed to be between a lady and a child, probably a young boy. Again, the sounds came from below the floor in the basement. These didn't last as long, possibly because God answered my prayers for them to stop. That night, I heard every single hour chime by, and every minute crawl past, every second tick by on the clock. Needless to say, The next morning, I wasn't a happy camper. Hope you enjoyed my stories, and yes, they're true. I told them just as I know them. Have a good one. I was in an infantry company in Germany back in 1989 to 1991. We used what is called a Bradley fighting vehicle. It weighs about 51,000 pounds and looks like a tank. We were doing live fire exercises at night, and we finished about 2 a.m. I was driving a Bradley in a convoy of about 10 other Bradleys, returning to the motor pool. The drivers used a large night vision scopes to see by. It's like watching green TV, and the Bradley commanders use that one that attaches to their helmets. While driving, a commander is to stand on his seat so that half of his body is outside of the vehicle, so that he'll have a better view of the surroundings. At about 3 a.m., I saw a man standing by the dirt road we were traveling on. I figured he was one of the German range patrolmen, and that he was just waiting for us to pass. Right after the Bradley in front of me passed, this man walked right out into the dust of that Bradley. I hit the brakes to avoid hitting him. At the exact moment, my commander said watch out, but it was already too late. I knew I must have hit him. I didn't even see him come out on either side. My commander then asked me if I'd seen a man walk out in front of us too. I said yes, and then he said that he had too. But when he turned around to check for a body, there wasn't one anywhere on the road. This dirt road was about 50 feet across, and when we returned to the motor pool, we took a flashlight and checked the whole front end, and found nothing. No blood, no piece of clothing. There was nothing. My name is Heather, and I live in Omaha, Nebraska. I've only seen a few ghosts or spirits in my life. Sometimes I do get the chills though, like someone or something is nearby. The first spirit I saw was when I was younger, about 13 years. My mother told me to go into our basement to get some candles, which wasn't unusual. We spent a lot of time in the basement, playing slot cars and electric trains, and my dad has a workshop down there for models. As I fetched the candles, I felt watched. I scampered back upstairs, startled and panicked, and told myself not to be so silly. I give Mom the candles. I don't remember why she needed them, and felt the nagging, watching feeling again. I opened the basement door, and a round, green-white light was bobbing slowly up the steps, I think about 3 to 4 feet off of the ground. I grabbed my jacket and ran outside to my grandma's house down the hill. I never saw it again, whatever it was, and everyone laughed at me for it, but I remember it clearly. It was green and glowing with a soft white light. Mom laughed and said it must have been a glow-in-the-dark Halloween candy bucket from the size and color, but she couldn't explain how it was floating. My house is quite old, about 80 years, and nothing like this has ever happened again. We're the third family living there, and nothing violent ever goes on. I still get the odd feeling, but it's never been strong enough to make me panic again. The second spirit I saw really floored me. I was 14 and was riding my bike around town since it was a nice summer day, and I ended up on 2nd and 22 in Q, about 3 miles from my house. There's nothing there but cheap houses, and it's not a bad neighborhood, but it's not the richest in the world. But it's not a cheap, run-down area. Just relaxed, second-hand. Nothing violent ever happened there before. It's become a run-down area now, and there was no graveyard or ancient Indian burial ground or anything that I or anyone else knows of. I wanted to go to Dairy Queen on 24th and Q, and I was behind it. As I came to 22nd, I saw a flat field where I knew there should be houses. It was filled with what I can now describe as short, rectangular tombstones. I saw a woman standing there, dressed all in browns and earth tones. I couldn't even see her face or hands. She had a headscarf on, and her hands were held in front of her, covered by her sleeves. I think she had on brown shoes, but I don't really remember her having feet or not. I'm inclined to think not. I asked her what this was, but she didn't answer. I turned back to the grays, which had vanished and replaced with the things that should have been there. Streets, houses, sidewalks, trees. I turned back to the lady, and she was gone. I had a very chilly, uneasy feeling, and a few dead leaves fluttered by. I rode away, as fast as I could. I once saw a strange figure in the mirror, a girl my age, 13, but with dark brown hair, with thin bangs, and braids past the bottom of the mirror frame. She just startled me, but caused me no harm. The last one I saw left me breathless and thrilled. I was staring out the window to our front window when I thought I saw something in the clouds. It couldn't have been lightning because it wasn't fast enough. It resembled very slow lightning. It was white and long and crooked. I got up and tried to stare out by the light. It was at a bad angle, so I stood up and walked to the front door. As I peered out the glass, I saw a flash of lightning and a giant pair of silvery white eyes, rimmed with blue, which then vanished in a flush. The outside of the window was covered with condensation, like breath, which smelled really sweet, like milk. I wiped it away. I've come to the conclusion that the first three were just random encounters, but the last one was a kind spirit, one that was looking in on me. I haven't seen anything so clearly after age 15, but sometimes I see holes in my vision, weird things. After rubbing my eyes and refocusing, they're gone. And sometimes I can hear odd noises and voices no one else can. I don't think I'm psychic or anything, but I do think I'm a little more sensitive than the people around me. I know, you may not believe this, but it happened. It's true. Thank you. Phantoms, I had a bad dream. I had a bad dream that I couldn't upload for 5 centuries, and I finally was able to upload, and nobody was watching. Hug me, guys, hug me. Okay, I don't know what I'm saying, guys. Thank you so much again for tuning in. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded another video, but guys, thank you so much for hanging in there. Please comment, like, share, and show your support. Let me know in the comments section how you're feeling right now, what you feel about yourself, and I don't know what that means. But just guys, let me know in the comment section below which stories you like the most. It's an honor to be your narrator, and it's really a relief to actually get a video out. You know, I'm sorry Sunday didn't work out for me. I was trying so hard to get a video out, and then all of a sudden something happened. My headphones, my accessories just broke, and it created a whirlwind of problems for me. So I apologize, guys, sincerely, but I hope this video makes up for it. I hope that you guys really enjoy it, and I hope that you guys are happy. I don't know. Well, I really do, though. But thank you, guys. Besides my nonsense, seriously, guys, it's been great being your narrator. And before I say that over and over again, I just got to cut this out and just let you know that the comment section is always available for us to discuss things like, you know, the stories that was told in this video. But yeah, guys, I'm done. That's all I'm going to say. Good night, good morning. I'll see you in the next video. Sorry to be short with you guys, but gotta go. Well, I mean, I'll see you guys in the comments. You know what I mean. I gotta go. Bye, 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 bye. Oh, and don't forget to share this video. Okay, now I'm going. Bye, bye.